Hello, and hello. It is that time of year when we can talk about our favorite and least favorite books in the past 12 months. It's a little early, but I just thought, you know, there's only like a few weeks left. I'm not gonna read that many more books. If I become terminally obsessed with one of them, I guess I will regret filming this video early. But like, I've never actually done one of these before, but I thought it would be fun to talk about my favorites. Also, to be honest, I am doing this because I want Senpei Kayla from Books and Lala to notice me. That's it. Like, my videos are not good, but if I can make her read one of my favorites, that would just be really funny to me. Except that most of my favorites are like Lord of the Rings. So the criteria is just gonna be if I gave something 5 stars. So I don't really talk about ratings when I film these videos because I don't think they're that important. And they're not objective, right? Like, I give something 5 stars if I love it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good. But I mean, sure, on some level, I would love to be able to say, yes, everything that I love is objectively good. But like, come on, that's not true. There's no way that's true. So we're gonna talk about 5-star books only. Just to give myself like a cutoff. And yeah, what else? Is there another disclaimer? I guess the only other disclaimer is I feel that the phrase the best books or my favorite books of 2022 is a little misleading because none of these books were published in the year 2022. I don't think I read anything published in 2022 this whole year because I just kind of don't get to books that fast, you know? So instead, obviously, I'm sure you know this, it's favorite books that I read in the year 2022. Okay. Let's get started with The Lord of the Rings. All 3 books / sections, which I read early this year, I gave 5 stars because The Lord of the Rings is without flaw. I would change, well, not nothing, I would change the couple of descriptions of orcs that are kind of racist. I would change those. But besides that, nothing else. That's literally it. Everything else is perfect. I don't even know how to like, what should I even say about Lord of the Rings? Like, haven't we all read it? Or at least heard of it? Don't we all know what it is? To be someone who doesn't know what Lord of the Rings is and can discover this for the first time. I don't know, man. Okay, it's a really, really good fantasy novel from the 1950s. I don't know, whatever. I'm not gonna explain the plot of Lord of the Rings. You know it, okay? You know it or you don't care to know it. And those are the options. Like, but I love it so much. Of course, this was not the first time I ever read it, but it had been probably like 10 years at least. Like, I've had a Goodreads account since college and I hadn't had Lord of the Rings on there. So it might even have been longer than 10 years. Although early on in my Goodreads career, I didn't always put everything I read on there. So it's possible that it hasn't been and I was just like, it's Lord of the Rings. Why do I need to record that I read it? I already know about it. Who cares? But who knows? Who knows what I was thinking? Or it's really been like 15 years since I last read it, but it's been a while, is my point. And it's phenomenal and I recommend it to everybody, but especially if you like fantasy. Please, if you like fantasy, why haven't you read Lord of the Rings? It's not that hard. Like, okay. It's 1,000 pages long, but it's split up into 3 books. So none of them are particularly long. Like 300-ish pages is not long. I don't know. I feel like if you read a lot, you should be good at reading and you should be able to read basically anything. And maybe that's just, you know, my personal bias as being somebody who is very good at reading. Like, wow, it's my one skill. Reading comprehension, A+. it helps. It helps you be good at other things. But what am I talking about? I just remember, like, I took AP English classes in high school, and in one of them we were like preparing for the AP exam, and we took a multiple choice reading comprehension type test because that's part of the exam, and the other part is you write a bunch of essays. I did the best out of the entire class in this test, which is probably why I did well in the AP exam, because I am not super great at writing essays. So like, I guess it balances out. Anyway, I was like, how is this not easy for everyone? So that's the kind of asshole I am. Anyway, read Lord of the Rings. Okay, 5 stars, 5 stars. Let's move on. Okay, so I feel that my 5 stars have a lot in common with each other this year. Rereads or parts of series for most of them, which is a little hard to approach if somebody were trying to get an idea of recommendation from this video for whatever reason. Like, because I get it, if I were like, oh, I want to read someone's favorite book from 2022, I don't want to pick something that's part of a series, so sorry. Because the next is The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. And I believe I gave the sequel 5 stars as well. Let's make sure. Where is it? I've got my notebook here. Children of God. Yes, 5 stars. Okay. I like The Sparrow better though, to be clear. Like, these are sci-fi. How do I explain The Sparrow? It's a sci-fi aliens first contact type story. It also has a lot of religion and philosophy in space. And I love that shit. I eat that up. So The Sparrow was always going to be enjoyable. I was just surprised by how much I loved it, honestly. Like, I thought, okay, this book should be interesting. It's about a Jesuit mission to another world. It is so much though. It is so much. I was not expecting to develop like a several month long pure obsession with this book. I love the way it was written. I love the mystery of it because it's told on 2 timelines. And one of them, you're watching Emilio Sandaz, who is a Jesuit priest from Puerto Rico, getting up, of course my battery's dying, of course it is, preparing for preparing for this journey to the other world, and then embarking on it, and also beforehand meeting the people who will eventually go to space with him. So like, there's that storyline. The other storyline is set like 40, 60, something like that years later, because of when you travel between 2 places at sublight speeds, or near light speed, relativity gets involved. So even though from his perspective he's only been gone for a few years, from everyone else's perspective on Earth it's been like, it was 20 or 40 or 60, I don't remember, like 40, let's go with 40. So, you know, he's obviously like aged relatively only a few years, and people who is the same age as him are now old men. But anyway, the other time period, he's come back to Earth after all of that. He's the last survivor of the mission. Something went terribly wrong. He is badly injured and traumatized, and it's like learning what happened, and as he is essentially interrogated / going through kind of a confession process with these other priests that he's living with in Naples, and they're trying to just kind of figure out what happened and how much was he at fault. It is so good. It is also dark. It has a somewhat bleak ending, and I think that's why Children of God is sort of necessary. Like, because Children of God allows Sandaz to heal from this ordeal somewhat, and also allows the story to have more hopeful ending, to have more positive things happen, while also sidestepping, I think, in a good way, making it sound like the terrible things that happened to Sandaz were worth it because of a good outcome. Like, I was worried that she would do that and she didn't, which I really appreciated, because I don't like that idea, right? But yeah, excellent books. Very, very good. Now I'm gonna pause and put my battery, plug my battery in. All right, I'm back. Having charged my battery, and I'm ready to jump into the rest of my favorites. I did not get through many, did I? Okay. Okay, so next I want to talk about A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine and A Desolation Called Peace by Arkady Martine. So again, it's another duology. Like I promise at some point I'm going to talk about something that's not a series, but that is not yet. A Memory Called Empire was a reread from a couple of years ago, and then the sequel came out, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to reread it. And then I will be in the exact correct, like, I don't know, position, mind space, knowledge to read this sequel. Really enjoy both of these books. It's science fiction, it's kind of space opera, I guess. I'm not sure what the definition of that is, but I think this kind of counts because, like, there's just a lot of politics and world building, and there are some aliens eventually. A really cool first contact kind of concepts going on in the second book specifically. Just really excellent. Like, I believe A Memory Called Empire won the Hugo a couple of years ago, I guess for 2019, because that's the year it was published. Yeah, so I've seen a few people talk about it, but it's just an excellent book. Also, lesbians. There's some lesbians. Just, you know, throwing that one out there as well. But, like, it's art. I just really love this duology. I would say, like, there are some interesting differences between the two books. Like, the first book is entirely from the perspective of the main character, who is a diplomat, an ambassador. And the second book is partially from her perspective, but also follows a few other characters. It was kind of an interesting choice, because I was like, okay, I don't think I've ever read a book before where the sequel went from, that went from one perspective to multiple. Like, I've definitely read books where you had different characters as the perspectives between books. Like in The Expanse, there's different characters every book, but it never goes from one to many. And also A Desolation Called Peace, I mean, the focus is much more on this alien first contact. It would be difficult for me to pick a favorite between the two, honestly. They're both very good, and I loved them a lot, and I would highly recommend. But what else? Let's move on. 5 stars, 5 stars. Oh, here we go. Mystic River by Dennis Lehane is like a very different thing. So this stands alone and is a mystery thriller novel set in Boston. There's a movie. It's a very good movie. I recommend it. I have actually seen the movie before reading the book, but I didn't remember some of the details, so it was still a fun experience to read. It's just really well written. The characters are all complex. I just love the way he writes and the way he describes Boston and the neighborhood that the people live in and the relationships that all of the people have with each other. And essentially it's about these 3 men who, when they were boys, were friends. And then they were playing in the street, and some guys drove up and said that they were cops and that the boys were in trouble for, playing hockey in the street or something. I forget what they were doing. Being disruptive, I guess. And the one boy did get into the car, the other 2 didn't. But of course they weren't cops. And the boy who got into the car with them ended up escaping from it makes it sound like a cabin in the woods, but I'm also like, where was he? Like, they started in Boston, but you know. And having been through this kidnapping and sexual assault, etc. situation, obviously, you know, and then comes back, and then obviously like this wildly changes like his life. But now they're all adults, they all still live in the same neighborhood. One of them has become a cop, one has become, was a kind of criminal mastermind, gang leader, if you will, but then was in prison for a while and is now kind of gone straight and owns a drugstore or a corner store. And then the third guy, who I don't remember what his job was because it doesn't really matter, but who comes home one night covered in blood and with an inadequate explanation to his wife. And then it turns out that the corner store guy's daughter is missing, and then she's found dead. So he's kind of the red herring. I mean, I felt that it was clear from early on that he probably didn't actually murder her and that he did something else. There was some other reason why he was covered in blood. But it's very good. Like, it's just, yeah, you're so curious about like what happened and everything, but also about all of the relationships between the characters and all of their like personalities, and it's very good. It's very good. Highly recommend. And I recommend the movie as well. I think the thing I've learned about myself when it comes to mysteries and thrillers is the more dude the perspective, the more I like them. So that's great. Because I was over here being like, yeah, Razor Blade Tears, Mystic River was great. I love John le Carré. Oh boy. Okay. I haven't read a John le Carré in like far too long. Small Gods by Terry Pratchett was a reread. I was in between books briefly. I kind of don't remember why. I must have been waiting for something from the library or something, and I had a few days, you know, before it was gonna come, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna reread Small Gods because it's on my shelf and I love it so much, and it was a good choice. Small Gods is one of my favorite Discworld books. How to describe it? It's about a monk, or a monk in training, who comes across his god one day. His god stuck in the form of a small tortoise. And then a bunch of other stuff happens. It's so good. Like, it really explores just the concepts of like belief and the kinds of things that a god might owe to the people that believe in him. Because in Discworld, the gods are real, right? Like, demonstrably they exist, and they are powered by belief. So if people believe in the god, then the god has power, right? Like, that's okay. And they're motivated to keep people believing in them, because if everyone forgets about them, they don't die, they don't vanish, they just diminish, and they kind of go crazy, and they're just like the small gods that are in the desert, whirling around and just sort of driving people insane, but not capable of anything more. And it's kind of a depressing ending. So he obviously, the great god who is currently a tortoise, wants to avoid that. It's very good. I mean, if you've never read Discworld, you should. And Small Gods would not be a bad place to start. Like, if you want to read Discworld, probably don't just start with book 1, because it isn't as good as some of the later stuff. And you don't really have to do it that way, you know? Like, it's not a series that demands to be read in order, except for the bits that do, kind of. Which is why there are so many guides online. I mean, like, how to read Discworld. But anyway, Small Gods stands alone as a Discworld novel, because it's not about any of the characters that the other books are about. I'm not 100% sure, but my impression reading it, and there was nothing really that contradicted that in this reread, is that it's set at an earlier time period than the other books. Like, there was a lot like where they go to this other city I don't remember the name of, and it's a lot like kind of all the philosophers, and it's like ancient Greece. So I just felt, you know, and there's that whole library that gets burned down, kind of like the Library of Alexandria. Like, it felt like it was supposed to be set in antiquity. But I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but that's just the impression I had. Anyway, it doesn't have any overlapping characters, and except for Death, but Death is Death. Death is in basically every Discworld book. Anyways, shut up, whatever. You should read Small Gods. You should read Discworld. You should read everything that I like. Okay, another reread. The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. I love this book so much, so much. This was a reread. I love this book so much that rereading it while sick in the hospital has not tainted the memory of how much I love this book, okay? Because I was sick in the hospital, and I was like, sibling, please bring me a book to read. Please bring me The Dispossessed, because it's on my shelf. I know I own it, whatever. Zero thoughts. I want to read it again. And I did, and it was wonderful. It's just such a good book. I don't even know how to explain it. I can never explain the books that I love. I'm just like, listen, you should read them. But it's really one of my favorites. It's science fiction, and it is about two worlds. One world is a lot like America, I guess, in that they have capitalism. But it's also kind of a nice future because they treat their planet really well. The other world is the moon, and there's people living there because there was like a group of anarchists who were sent there to live away from the rest of the planet because they didn't want them around. And they've formed over the last 200 years their own way of life. So they have very different ways of life. I mean, in many ways it resembles the West versus Soviet Russia / the East during the Cold War. These are two communities that don't interact with each other much, they don't communicate, and they have very different ways of living their lives. It's obviously exaggerated, but the main character comes from the moon. I'm sorry, I don't remember what it's called. And so we see throughout the book his life story, but we also see that at some point in the future, because this is told on two timelines, at some point in his life he goes to the planet to interact with the scientists there because he's like a physicist, and he is kind of like culture shock, but also he needs to figure out what it is he specifically like believes, I guess. And how can he interact with the world he's in now in a way that's like true to himself, I guess. It's just really well written. Everybody should read some Ursula K. Le Guin, and this is one of her best, if not her best. It would be tough for me to choose between this and The Left Hand of Darkness. I think I would go with The Left Hand of Darkness, but it's a very, very close race. But yeah, The Dispossessed is just fantastic. Now, why don't we talk about a nonfiction? Possibly the only nonfiction I'm going to talk about. The Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan. This book was absolutely fantastic. And it tells the history of the world from Alexander the Great to 2014. So it's quite ambitious. But with the perspective of talking about the connections between the East and the West, that is, the Silk Road, both literally and like metaphorically or whatever. And the ways in which like the center of human civilization is sort of in that space in between the greater part of Asia and Europe and Africa. There's like the Middle East and kind of the general area running from Russia down, you know, through like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then also down into the Middle East. Like that, you know what I mean? Like that part of the map is what this book focuses on, how that part connects the rest of the world and how important it's been to history. And it's just an interesting perspective on history because, like, as an American, when I learned history, it was always from that very American perspective of like, we're the center of the earth. We're the only people who matter, you know? And if not us, then Europe, and specifically England. And before that, Greece for some reason. But like, you know, it's a view on history that leaves a lot of stuff out. And so I found this book to be very interesting. I learned a lot. I would highly recommend it. Now, I think we're almost done. Okay, we have two more to talk about. And yeah, let's go. They're both the beginning of series, which is a little awkward. But Gideon the Ninth is where we're gonna start, by Tamsin Muir. This is like a fantasy book, sort of set in space. There's a whole bunch of different houses, which each have their own specialties and different kinds of necromancy. And Gideon was raised as kind of a ward of the ninth house. and she's forced to accompany the ninth house heir, Harrow, to this sort of weird contest thing where they're trying to become lictors or something. I don't know what that is, but it is a wild book and it is a lot of fun. The way it's written is just super entertaining. I have heard it described as lesbian necromancers in space, and that is not inaccurate, but Gideon is not a necromancer. And while she does appear to be a lesbian, yes, she is not in a relationship with Harrow at any point in this book. It seems like they're maybe moving in that direction eventually, but not in this book. I just want you to know that. But anyway, Gideon is really a fun character to read. Harrow is disturbing and very entertaining. The necromancy is very gross and very entertaining. Like, the whole thing is great. And it's also kind of, it's this mystery because they're in this ancient labyrinth of a house trying to figure out what this contest even means, and discovering different like things about necromancy that are kind of like, there's like keys that they have to find. It's really interesting. I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to continue reading the series as soon as I have time. So hopefully very soon. And then the other book, kind of unexpectedly, 5 stars to Iron Widow by Sharan J. Zhao. I picked this up because and also this is a book that I read in December, so like, I guess you'll hear more about it when I make my actual December wrap up eventually, but I picked Iron Widow up because like I'd heard of it, but I didn't, you know, I heard like mixed things about it, I don't know. But at least one person whose videos I watched really liked it. And she's not right about everything, but I thought I'd give it a go. It is excellent. And I think like, I don't often love young adult books, but this one is really dark. And I think that helps. It's essentially like they're giant mechas powered by chi, which is why I personally am kind of classifying it as fantasy rather than sci-fi. And honestly, Gideon the Ninth as well. Like, I think these are both fantasy novels. They just have kind of similarities to, or sci-fi elements. Like, Iron Widow has a similarity to Pacific Rim, because they've got these big like mechas that are fighting monsters, but they're all powered by chi, which is essentially like a kind of a life force energy. So that's magic as far as I'm concerned. It's very good. It's like, it gives kind of this impression of this melding of ancient China with futuristic technology. Like, the main character has her feet bound. It's like very, like the most disturbing part of the book really is when she's recalling like how her grandmother broke her feet. It's like, oh my God. But like, they also have hovercraft and stuff. So it's the future. And then the end of the book is like, by the way, here's some insane shit. And I was like, I knew something was up. I knew something was fucking up, because none of this didn't fully make sense. Like, so I'm really excited to read the sequel. I do not know what the plan is for like length of series. It kind of looks like a duology at the moment, but I don't know if that's like accurate. Oh, but I just thought it was very good. Yeah. Very, very good. And that kind of rounds out my favorites of the year. I'm currently rereading Leviathan Wakes, which is unquestionably going to get a 5 stars from me, but we don't need to get into that. It's, you know, it's a reread. It's not only that, but it's a reread of something that I read not that long ago. Because I want to finally finish the series. So I'm like, all right, obviously the solution to that is just to read the whole thing again, right? But otherwise, I probably won't have any other 5 stars this year. So I thought, let's just film it now. And yeah, will I do a video talking about my least favorites? I might, because I think it'd be, you know, nice to have both. I don't have as many, so I don't think I'm, if I was gonna look at ratings, I have a handful of things I rated 2 stars. But I don't know if I would want to just stick with those, because there's a few books I gave maybe 3 that maybe I shouldn't have. Anyway, it's, yeah, my rating system is super arbitrary. It's just like how I feel in the moment, and that doesn't always mean the same thing. But anyway, I loved all of these books. I recommend all of these books. And I mean, it's just nice to come across books like a nice combination of here were things that I knew I would love because I've loved them before, and then here are things like The Sparrow or like Iron Widow that I wasn't expecting to love that much, and I ended up really, really loving. So new favorites, old favorites, blah, blah, blah. Please read some of them. Please read The Dispossessed. That's really, I think, that's really it, right? People talk about Lord of the Rings all the time. A lot of the other books are newer books. The Dispossessed is super duper excellent, and people don't talk about it enough, I think, personally, and it is really good, and you should read it. The end.